Hi there, this is Outdoor Gear Chat. We're up to episode 40, the big 40. I am proper excited. I'm not just saying it. I'm not just saying it because you're on, Cathy. To
Oh, really?
about today's guest. I really am. I've been looking forward to this for a while now. But I'm joined as always by Cathy. Hiya, Cathy.
Hi, Wayne. How you doing? I am Cathy Casey, and I'm one of the directors and co-owners of the Joe Brown shops in Snowdonia and the Climber shop in Ambleside. And I know the reason you're very excited today, Wayne. And it could have been a slightly better. Ideally, it would have been an outdoor broadcast, our first foray into outdoor broadcasting today, and we would have had our guest with us with his copious outdoor kitchen, cooking delectable comestibles. But the weather and geography means it's not so. But however, who cares? We have with us today Fellfoodie, also known as Harrison Ward, who is famous for fabulous cooking in the fells. He's even cooked for Mary Berry, but uses the fells for solace, gym, and also a kitchen. So it is an absolute delight to welcome you, Harris. Welcome to the Outdoor Gear Chat podcast.
Well, that is a tremendously warm welcome. So with the weather outside at the moment, I think that's needed too. A lovely alliteration as well. What a fantastic intro. But no, thank you for having me.
She went very poetic, strangely poetic there, actually, didn't she? Yeah, it is proper exciting to speak to you, though. I know we've spoken, I think, a couple of times before and met up once before, which we'll cover shortly, I'm sure. But yeah, I've been following your progress for some time. What's the word? Is it vicariously when you see somebody from a distance and go, "Oh, there ace they are," or is that stalking?
Used to it these days.
Yeah, you're happy with any. You still don't regard yourself as a celebrity, but I most definitely do, mate. So, yeah, I mean, you've got some story ending up where you are at the moment, I guess, haven't you? There's some tale to tell. And for our listeners that might not know about it, would you mind just going over your sort of a bit of your background for us?
Absolutely, yeah. So life story in 2 minutes, shall we?
Yeah.
All good. No. Yeah, I mean, these days, of course, I'm well known for being in the Lake District, for sort of enjoying the fells, for being out there quite active and known under the guise of Fellfoodie. But it wasn't always really that way for me. It was something that came quite later in life, despite growing up quite close to the Lake District, just outside Carlisle. I really didn't embrace what was on the doorstep at all. Didn't embrace the fells. Didn't find a love of them till really mid sort of adulthood, really. And throughout that time, I found myself really being quite plagued by poor mental health, what I later found out to be clinical depression, that subsequently became something I utilized alcohol for to sort of sedate, really, to shut down those darker thoughts. So literally overnight through puberty, found myself going through these darker days, not really being as confident as I was before, sort of quite self-loathing, quite demotivated, and really something I kept very quiet to myself. Didn't want to bring other people down, didn't want to be a burden for other people. And although I was enjoying outdoor activity at the time, so a lot of team sports, a lot of adventures near me, sort of Hadrian's Wall sort of area, I was sort of talking Tarn, the Pennines, it really wasn't a major part of my life. And throughout this time, I worked a lot in the hospitality trade. I was working back a house, and as I worked up through the years and got to 18, I started working behind the bar. And as many of us do, that rite of passage, that sort of culture that's ingrained in this country, I was sort of introduced to the world of alcohol. And it was something that initially was sort of, the male bravado, going through those instances, that Dutch courage, that social lubricant. But it was also really helping me alleviate those darker thoughts that I was really battling with most days. And I guess this was something that really began to snowball. I moved away to York for university, and my drinking really became out of control at that sort of point. I was drinking most days, in excess at one point of over 20 pints a day. Weight-wise, I'd ballooned to about 22 stone. I mean, very sort of lethargic, obese, not doing any exercise. I'd taken up smoking at the time and was just completely battling, really, with my own afflictions to the point of really wishing I wasn't here, sort of suicidal ideations, and just really contemplating my own existence. And it was something that really I couldn't see a way out for. Again, I hadn't spoke to anybody to reach out for help. I felt this was my cross to bear. I felt I had to get on with it, very much highly functioning. And all of it sort of came to a head in a breakdown in 2016, really, the end of a relationship that I was in, really subsequently unfaithful under the influence to this partner, caused by sort of the alcohol that I was in, was constantly drinking myself to oblivion each day. And I came back home to Cumbria, and that's really where the journey began to sort of turn and began to change into a much more positive one that it is today.
It's an amazing story, mate. I know, yeah, maybe a conversation for another time. But I've got loads of parallels with the way that you've gone as well. So my first career was in hospitality, worked in front of house, and yeah, can definitely relate to it was always work hard, play hard, wasn't it? You work in long hours, but you go out on the beer and the rest of it after work, and then it's just into a cycle. Then I guess, isn't it? And so yeah, so how where did the call of the fells come then? When was that, if you forgive the term, I suppose, was that the medicine? Was that the replacement for the beer to go out into the fells?
It began to go that way for sure. I mean, I saw alcohol as very medicinal for me at the time, although it later became clear it was a poison for me. And coming back to sort of Cumbria, initially I'd become very clean to friends and family about what I was going through, put my hands up really at how much I was struggling, and moved away from York literally overnight. I'd gone from being in the city for 7 years, a lot of peers, both in the pub trade and also outside of that. Obviously, the relationship, my university friends from before that, and just literally overnight, after having this sort of moment, really, of coming to terms with the fact I'd become an alcoholic, I'd acted unfaithfully to my partner. I felt as if I was no longer the person I believed I was, a compromised individual. And I felt I had to leave that environment. I felt I was too comfortable in that setup to try and really make a change in my life, because I was basically trying to get myself sober, try and make this change. I suppose to try and win this partner back initially, but as time went on, for myself. And on coming back to Cumbria, I basically put on my Facebook page at the time saying that, I had to leave York, the reasons behind that, and literally, I was at my rock bottom moment. I was completely vulnerable, and at that point, I suppose, feeling that there was no alternative really, that either sort of shuffling off this mortal coil or trying to really pick myself up from that foundation crumbling moment. And I threw myself into fitness to try and replace that big hole that alcohol had left in my life, because it was literally my sole focus most days. And initially, it was maybe just getting my old bike back out the sheds and cycling around the local roads towards Lanercost and Walton. And then perhaps, I was heading to the gym a little bit more. And then one friend decided to take me out in the hills for hiking. So at the time, I didn't know what to expect. I had no equipment really to my name. I literally put on my hand to hand. I'd never really been out walking in the hills before. I think probably coffee and cake in Keswick was about as far as I'd come in the past, and a little day trip with the family. And it was something that, I just didn't know what to expect. But I guess I was that much determined to make that change going forward. I was just throwing myself into anything that was coming my way, really sort of trusting whatever opportunities were coming that way. And the fact that I had that faith from that friend as well to try and help me on this journey too. So anyway, at the time, I put up my hand to hand, which was some old scabby shorts. I think I had a jumper I'd wear down the pub on a Friday, and some trainers perhaps that I wore for every purpose, no matter what. And they certainly had no grip on them anyway. They'd be more keen at the bowling alley, I think, these shoes. And he took one look at me and said, you can't go like that. I mean, look at the state.
You're going to die, yeah.
Absolutely. And again, like I would these days as well, looking back sort of thing. But it's a reminder, I suppose, of where you start and where you come from these points. You're not always instantly to an expert level. There is entry level to this stuff. And on the way to the lakes, he pulled off at an outdoor store. Wasn't the Climber Shop or Joe Brown's on that occasion, but he he pulled a pair of boots off the counter and put them on at the till and bought me these boots. And again, it was a huge show of faith and support, really. Yeah. And 20 minutes later, he pulled up at the base of Blencathra, and I'm staring up at this mountaintop. And that moment of faith I'd appreciated about 20 minutes prior was now dissolved as I was looking up this hill, thinking, "What have I got myself in for here?" And so literally, I mean, this is 2 weeks after that major turnaround. So I haven't done exercise for about 5 years. Again, I was grossly overweight, pining for my ex, my head's pounding from withdrawal, and I basically frog marched up this mountainside. So I'd be lying if I'd say it was an enjoyable experience the first time round, because it very much wasn't. God knows how long it took me to get up there. Again, I wasn't counting that one on Strava on my sport at the time, but slowly but surely we made it to the summit top, and there was the summit, the Trig Circle on the top of Blencathra, and he turned to me and said, "Right, we're doing Helvellyn next week." And that was it. Really, a week later, the same story again. Pulled up the base of Helvellyn from the Filmere side, and again looking up at this ginormous hillside that again I'd driven past perhaps at the time, but would never have contemplated going into it really. And again thinking the fact that level there, it was almost like so far removed from what was possible in the hills. Again, that to me seemed like a step too far. It was almost like, that's a professional mountain to do. I'm not the level to do that sort of hill at that time, because I had no experience at all really. And the same story again, I guess, one foot in front of the other, marching up this stone staircase to the summit of Helvellyn. But It was a fantastically glorious June day at the time, blue skies, but again, it probably still took me a fair while up that hillside. And again, contemplating really the metaphor of what was going on in life for me, I guess, that uphill struggle, pushing on through the pain, not knowing what was to come. I'd never seen what the summit looked like before. I didn't really know. Again, I was trusting my friend at this time who'd been at the hill before. So again, I wasn't taking perhaps even navigational tools or anything with me at the time, because I was very much putting my trust in him at the time, which again, something else I guess I learned on the way, I suppose, you've got to make self-assured yourself on these fells. But again, reaching that top, looking over there, striding edge, sort of red tarn below, and the Pennines, it was just like something else was being sparked in me. This new addiction was beginning, and really began this journey with a love of the fells that was then becoming much more for me. Again, a medicinal tool, and also something that never had those negative connotations that perhaps alcohol has. Was giving me that same endorphin boost, that same hit of dopamine, that happiness and achievement of getting to the tops without any of that downward slide, despite the decline that obviously had to come to get back down to the car.
So it was a bit of soreness in the knees and ankles rather than soreness in the head and internally, I guess, isn't it? Yeah, it didn't make it easy on you there though, really. There's easier fells to start off with, isn't there? And I guess going up Helvellyn from that side, you have got everything in front. When you get if you've got the benefit of a view, you have got some view set out in front of you from there, haven't you? So that's something else. But yeah, you could have gone up Loughrig, for example, would have been a bit more gentle, wouldn't it?
It was quite a baptism of fire, that's for sure. I think Scarfield Pike was the week after, and I think within a month we were down to Snowdonia by Cribgoch, and it was just very much just right, off we go. This is life now. And I guess at the time you mentioned sore knees, sore ankles, but I was just completely broken all over it at the time. Again, I wasn't of the fitness thing. Mentally, I wasn't there either. I was going through obviously withdrawal from substance, and I'd come off cigarettes at the time and all sorts. I was just all over the place, I guess, just putting my faith and blind faith really, and just motivation to try and move forward, to get out from that cycle that I just clearly believed was not me as a person, but I'd fell into that slope and fell into that crevice really.
And again, you maintained that discipline. Then do you regularly go out in the fells now? I know, I'm guessing you do.
Certainly early on. I mean, this was back in 2016, this major change point. So it was the 6th of June 2016. So again, it was literally those first few weeks, those first few mountains. And these days, it's very much, part of my life that I do on the regular, though it has been quite different in recent years, I suppose. I mean, I've now never really aimed for this to become anything other than a hobby at the time, but it's now become my full-time entity. I'm often on the road, traveling about, doing lots of wonderful talks at schools and corporates and other businesses and expos. So there's a lot of time outside of county now as well, that sometimes it doesn't always fit into that lifestyle. So I'm working out that new balance, I guess, that work-life balance. And I think also, I keep wondering how long I can use it as an excuse, really. But I think routines just kind of got shattered, I think, when we all went through sort of lockdown period for me. And coming out the other side, I went freelance in a completely different life from a 9-to-5 job I was doing at the time. So very routine-esque. I was running a lot after work. I was going to the hills most evenings, to then all of a sudden not being allowed to go to those areas, even though I was living in the Lake Districts, and completely didn't feel as if I had any ability to feel any guilt from other people, because I was in such a beautiful area during that point, but still wasn't going out there myself. So it became quite reclusive, lost that routine I built slightly, and then coming out into a different world in the outdoors. I guess it's been a fine balance of getting that back in play for myself anyway, for the mental and physical gain. I mean, certainly for the work side of things, I am doing what I love these days. I'm out there with any people, enjoying what they do too, meeting people from the same environment. So there's certainly an outdoor aspect to that, but perhaps not to the full extent as it was those years prior to lockdown. But we're working on it. We're getting back to those days.
Yeah, it's a funny one though, isn't it? I think I stopped going out, and I can't remember when I had a conversation with somebody, but I guess the three of us on the call probably have all sorts of mates in search and rescue teams, and we've interviewed Stu Smith from Patterdale, for example, and that was the thing for me. It was there was that click, and I was like, I can go out swimming in the lake, or I can go out on the fells, but if anything happens to me, all my mates are going to get called out to come and rescue me. And being brutal was, I couldn't face me lying there going, I'm sorry, and what they'd be saying to me as a result of that. You've called us out in this global pandemic just because you've gone over on your ankle for it. Wouldn't be, but So, but you're right. It's still, there's still a lot of people, I think, struggling with that. Yeah, trying to get back into that habit. I think, isn't it? Is folk putting it positively, that the habit of doing activity in the way that I think you're sort of describing.
been a real shift and a polarization, I think, because there's been people that went all out during lockdown, depending on your job situation. Some folks found themselves with a huge amount of time on their hands and have just never been fitter because they just went bonkers. And actually physio friends were shortly after, in like 2021, were saying we've never seen so many broken people because they just went all out and just trained their socks off. And then depending on if you had a job where you're a key worker, by the time you got to your own free time, you're probably flat on your back having a kip because you're absolutely so tired. So it's been a really, really weird time. And I think it's definitely a time that we're probably all recovering from, perhaps don't even know quite what we're recovering from because it was so intense. And I know for me, like I use the outdoors as my solace. You know, I'm quite happy just trundling off on my own with a rucksack and a bivy bag to just go and get headspace, just to concentrate on breathing, my own kind of natural time rhythm, and you know, go and knock off some distance and just physically feel brilliant at the end of a few days, and then reconnect with my life when I come back. And as you say, there was that sort of sudden weird skew of that place that you always look for, the outdoors that you always look for comfort and for fulfillment. And suddenly there was a load of parameters around there that were completely alien. It became not an easy place to step foot into. And of course, it became very busy as well, depending where you went. You had to go quite a bit further afield to find quieter places. But that said, getting out with your kit, your rucksack, your stove, Harrison. In fact, I've got to ask, how many stoves do you have? Just out of curiosity, do you have a personal collection, or do you just have one all-time favourite?
Don't, because you're just going to get envy, one of you. I know the way this goes.
I tend to class myself as having an open relationship with stoves. I haven't come that's one that hasn't quite taken my fancy full time, or again hasn't been an organised, contracted sort of partnership either. But yeah, I've built up quite a repertoire over the years. I mean, from my first one that was a wood burning, it was actually the BioLite stove was the first one I sort of got, which was more of like a thermoelectric type, which was a bit gimmicky to some, but I quite like the aspects of being able to have a sort of real fire that I could control when I was out and about, like a hob at home, while still being elevated, not a campfire that was going to leave any scorch marks and things on the side. But during sort of, as time went on, I realised maybe I couldn't use that in the expos. I couldn't also use that in certain weather conditions because it wasn't as safe, perhaps in the drier season. So I moved more towards canister-based stoves. And since then, I guess that repertoire and that cupboard has often been relocated as it's needed more space as time's gone on. So I've got all sorts from, you know, very large, big sort of tripod, more van life type stoves, some sort of Alki. I've got some OEX and Go Outdoor stoves in there as well. Recently some primer setups I've been utilising that I recently came and visited yourselves with as well.
Yeah.
That's been quite a favourite since taking those ones out. But literally, I quite enjoy just the aspect of trying to see what can be recreated on perhaps, you know, a single burner sort of thing. So again, the test of different stoves, I think, is half the challenge. I don't like to sort of say, like, this is the only stove you can use to do this sort of thing, or the only piece of equipment to do this. The idea is to try and see that can work across the multiple. Some certainly have their own pros and cons, for sure. I mean, obviously, like more of a water boiler, sort of the Jet Boil or the OEX Hero, for example, are going to be great for getting a quick boil for a dehydrated meal or a cup of coffee. But if you're going to try and make a risotto in one of those, you're going to find you get quite a vigorous stirrer to avoid it all being cremated onto the bottom of the pan because it's so intense. But a wider burner, then again, will take a lot longer to boil the water, for example. So not going to be as good for pulses or rices or vegetables, but it's going to be much better for creating up a stew type option. So sometimes using in tandem for different conditions, different weather, different weights for different journeys. Again, I like to bounce partner to partner for the stoves type thing.
It is actually from what I'm sensing, it's the same as bikes. It's N+1 essentially.
Well, yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's a bit magpie syndrome, isn't it? I think it just gathering, nice shiny thing. I'll take those again. But yeah, they do all get their fair use, I think, from time to time. And again, hopefully, I'll be able to maybe try and document a bit more about all of them in the future. But they've all got their own purposes, their own benefits, and sometimes, it's just nice trying new ones out. But you often wonder sometimes when a new one comes out again, you go, well, what can be that different again now? But a new one coming out, what's it going to do differently here? It's going to have laser precision or something on there. It's a similar setup, but I've definitely found some favourites I like to go back to for certain dishes. But yeah, I'm sure the list will still grow.
And, well, yeah, you missed one small part of the puzzle for me there. So you were working in hospitality. You've been through everything you've been through. You've gone through alcohol withdrawal, found the fells, and then how did you link those two parts of the puzzle together? You know, how did you start cooking outside? Is I guess the easy way of asking it.
Yeah, for sure. It's quite a random tangent, isn't it? Definitely, I agree. But for me, I think it was something that food had been that early passion. I think something that I loved experiencing as a child. I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, who was a keen cook, and it was often sort of memories of the family gathering together on that Sunday when you've been sort of making of that meal in the kitchen. I was getting put to work, being the oldest of 7 cousins, and liked being involved in the process, and then seeing the subsequent almost joy and happiness that people had on receiving said sort of cooked dishes. So I liked that aspect of giving and sort of that came with cooking, and it started a bit of a self-scholarship. So I enjoyed watching a lot of programs on cooking, different cuisines from around the world, and how different cultures would embrace food. Again, some perhaps with more outdoor origins, but it wasn't really coming to me at that point, that element. But just basically began watching and learning. Of course, food hospitality as well. I was never taught. I was never in the kitchens other than sort of pot washing or a bit of prep chefing. But I'd often have a lot of people I'd met along the way that I could watch and learn from and ask questions with, and just had that intrigue, I guess. It was just a passion that was there. And I liked to experiment when I was at home. So when I got into the outdoors for the first time, of course, maybe during the darker days, I was more likely to be grabbing a few chips out the pub kitchen or falling in a takeaway at 4 a.m. But the culinary side came back out again, because again, I was trying to focus more on my health. So I was cooking from scratch again a lot more at home at first, a lot more organic dishes out there, or fresh produce that was locally sourced where I could. And I began taking, I suppose, quite extravagant packed lunches with me into the hills when I was out walking. So just stuff I'd made the night before or leftovers. And again, I get some comments from my peer or my friend or people walking past when they got their meal deals out or their soggy cling film sandwiches. And I'd be tucking into some nice stew on the top of the hills and things. And someone just said, why didn't you get a stove and actually cook it out here from scratch? Just being a bit of a smart aleck, really. And I thought, you know what, I will. So I bought a stove.
I love it.
And I just give it a go. I just tried to see if I could take my kitchen from home with me into the outdoor environment, because that, of course, now is providing a lot of, again, solace, as you mentioned for me before, a lot of recovery methods. It was something that I felt very human in being in those environments. So again, cooking was the other thing that I found quite mindful at home and enjoyed the process of it. So merging the two now passions, it seemed like, well, is it crossing the stream slightly? Is this going to work? Is it going to make it? Oh no, I hate both these things now.
Oh, it's a
I'm not going to enjoy it. And again, like the start, I had no equipment. I'd bought that first stove, and again at the time I was still quite poor sort of money wise. I was still paying a lot of debts off from York and my previous life, and that sort of reconsolidated. And I sort of bought this stove, which was quite an investment for me at the time, because again, I was still very basic kit at the time as well, just working my way up into this passion. And then basically everything else was from the kitchen at home. So it was the proper sort of, so I have a ceramic plate. So it was proper big boards and coming out. I had a pestle and mortar with me at one point. And so the weight aspect was not even considered. It was just seeing if I could recreate this now in a difficult environment sometimes with smaller equipment and a single burning source. And so it just went from there. And I found I quite enjoyed it. By the time I'd already dubbed myself the Fellfoodie on a social media channel, and I guess initially I was just showcasing the adventures I was having, just the view I was experiencing, really, and the food I was taking out with me. And I didn't show anything about my story, who I was, didn't reveal it was me. When I got to my second year sober in 2018, I began to share that story in its entirety on there, by which time I'd gained a little bit of a following from this quirky cooking meals on the hilltops aspect that I was doing, and seeing what could be created out there that perhaps, was a bit alien to some people. And it went from there. So I was offered to have a few chances to speak further on my story on some of the bigger platforms. And again, the food side picked a bit of intrigue from some of those other foodie outdoor enthusiasts that, again, didn't want to just rely on perhaps the boil in the bags, or, really leave food being the sacrifice point all the time. Because I felt like it was always the thing that we think last of. It was like, I'll just get a few snack bars and something from the shop and I'll go out for the day. And for me, I'd always loved my food, and I never liked to really conform to that fast food sort of culture. So when I got into the outdoors too, I wasn't going to really do the same there. So whilst I can see the practicality sometimes isn't always there is ways and means of perhaps making something at home first, like the early days, or packing into a food flask, or again trying to reheat something through, or with some peers, that can make something much more enjoyable and just elevate that experience with something to look forward to at a nice sheltered point. In a day like we're having today, of course, during this storm that's coming through, I'm much more likely to be at home home with the telly on, doing a nice box set binge, I think, rather than cooking out. But on some nice days, a nice little activity. So that's sort of how it started. So it was quite just a really random sort of branch out, I guess, into a new category of two passions getting merged.
I love the tale. I think that's if you forgive the wording on that. I love the way that you just described that is brilliant. And I think it must have been some time about 2018. I think when I became aware of you. I think it must have been something because I've known of you for a number of years. That's for sure. Then yeah. So following on from that then and going through the continuum, if you will. So first question, or the next question for me is, what were those boots that your friend bought you?
Testing me now. I mean, actual
just what brand?
Actual model, I'm not too sure. They were just a pair of high-tech boots, I think, at the time. So very entry-level boots. I think they were £20 on there. And those were the boots that I had for the next year and a half that did all those first mountains. I went down to Snowdonia, did Ben Nevis in those. I did the 3 peaks. So it was very much an entry-level goods that I think was always something I'd almost recommend in a way as well, rather than jumping straight to the high-level brands and going, look, I'm going to dance myself out of all the gear instantly. It was seeing if I liked this activity. And again, now I know that is the piece of equipment I'd probably invest more in, that and good waterproof and other stuff. But at the time, it was going, well, I don't really know. I mean, I might just use these once and never do it again. I don't know. I'm not going to go and buy a £300 pair and off I go and sit on the shelf. I mean, well, I couldn't afford them anyway at the time. So it was a high-tech pair, I believe, at the time. And
I was going to say
they did eventually fall apart on me completely. I think they ended up being a nice sort of
flapping
type flapping. But it was all good.
But well loved.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess that's one of the reasons why I asked the question, really, is that, it is an entry level boot, isn't it? But that it was that moment of that catalyst from your friend, really, that sort of sparked some of it off, isn't it? And I guess that you don't have to spend 300 quid on a bit of footwear to go out in the fells, but by the same token, you don't want your plimsolls. Yeah, is where you would have been going originally.
I was close to it.
Yeah. And I'll move on to more of Cathy's stream, I guess, now. But what do you wear now then? What do you wear on your feet?
So these days, I'm not sure the one you retail actually, but I tend to wear barefoot boots currently. So I wear the Vivo Barefoot tracker boots.
Right.
So I kind of started wearing them about 3 years ago as a bit like the BioLite, a bit gimmicky, I suppose. I'll try these out, see what it was, and they've almost become really what I wear across the board. So the shoes I wear day to day. My previous job, I even had sort of the work shoes were all barefoot for the gym. So always in that. But then when it comes to more winter months, I then move on more to sort of a Scarpa, sort of B2C2 boot on there. A much harder sort of format there when I'm out and about, because I find they're not able. And long distance, I've also found at times they can not perform quite as well. I think your feet do get quite tired if they're not trained up in that style of thing. So I enjoy them perhaps just for plodding about the hills for a shorter day or a nice horseshoe route. But again, if I was doing more point to point, I'd go for a much more rigid boot. Again, I had a nice Berghaus leather pair that I'd go back to quite a bit, that still have their place on my shelf. Are a bit neglected these days. But I think it's very, very individual thing, boots, aren't they? I think it's not the sort of thing you can always go, everyone should go and get these now. I think it's all about your individual taste and how your foot is, how particularly how you walk, how your gait is, all sorts of things. I think it's something that you can't always push people towards. They should just go in and try, and again, come into the likes of yourself and speak perhaps, and try some different pairs of boots out, see what's best for them. But again, I think, as you say, that entry level, perhaps if you're just starting out, if you Mr. Moneybags or Mrs. Moneybags, then by all means go for that nice pair straight away. But if you just get into it for the first time, perhaps finding a nice entry level, reasonable pair to go in that's going to do the job, but also provide that safety and security you need from a boot, I think is what I'd say.
The best boot is the most comfortable one, and maybe you need to adapt what you're doing accordingly. But everybody's feet are completely unique. Even an individual foot isn't. You've got two, but one's not the same as the other, and it's just a case of which boot that comes off of a production line fits your the volume of your foot, the length of your foot correctly, and fits around your heel cup as well. So it's absolutely something to come in, not something to buy on the hoof, if you'll forgive the pun.
Like it.
Yeah. But
I for one am not forgiving that pun. No.
You've already thrown a few out there. I think
Yeah, I know.
you're 2-0 down.
Yeah. And you mentioned before, I think you said that if you weren't gonna, if you were you weren't gonna scrimp on anything. I think boots and waterproofs you'd mentioned. So do you have a go-to waterproofs as well? Are they that you wear now?
Yeah, so I tend to again, something that I think is more tried and tested. Again, is the whole sort of how many waterproofs can really hold up to the Lakeland weather or do the job. So I think all of them at some point maybe have their limits to some degree, depending on like the storms like this today. But I think it's just making sure I'm layered up correctly out there. I've always got the equipment with me in case the weather turns, even through those summer months. But again, having something that's quite nice. I tend to favour sort of multiple layers rather than having something that's maybe aligned waterproof and stuff in there. So I'll try and get a nice mid layer on, base layer as well. Perhaps I'll have a fleece over the top, and then I've got just a nice sort of shell over the top, shell waterproof really. So for me, again, I haven't got a particular brand I sort of go to on there. I think there's some that I maybe pick out, maybe sometimes even on the colour of the jacket for the day. Maybe I'll go which one I want. So I think in recent years, again, I have to very much appreciate my privilege, but I have been lucky to build up more of a repertoire of equipment due to, I guess, having some brands working with me along the side and bits on there. I appreciate everyone wouldn't always have that aspect. At the very start, I think I was using, again, a Peter Storm Cagoule that was in the little bag that I had from a residential when I was on 15 years old, and that came back out the cupboard and off it went. And very much how I started with orbits like that. So there was no real high-end brands and stuff at the time, all very entry level or own brands from some of the bigger retail outlets. But these days, again, I've got quite a repertoire. I guess too many jackets to wear in a week really. So it's a nice place to be. But they all do the job very well. So but I always make sure I've got obviously the right bits in there. But again, I am a man who favours his shorts no matter about, even in sort of poor weather. I like having the freedom to move whilst also having a bit of warmth in my bag just in case it does turn south.
Yeah, it's a good way to be. I think I think we've spoken similar on some of our earlier podcasts, Cathy, where we were saying, stick a pair of shorts or a pair of light running tights, and then get some waterproofs over the top if you need them.
Yeah, it's amazing how much difference just a pair of waterproof trousers over the top can make, especially if it's wet and windy. It makes a huge difference, and it's not a lot of weight and bulk to carry either.
Well, that's it. Almost the wind sort of chill protection on them slightly as well. I mean, obviously not going to cater out there for a long time, but just as a slight upshift from a pair of from shorts or again a pair of running tights you've got on sort of thing, adding that sort of base on there is going to just give you a little bit longer to go out in that weather, isn't it? Really. But if I'm stood still on the hilltops, I guess if I am sort of even cooking, kneel down, perhaps, then I'm always got something I want to put a bit more shorts of that path, or maybe we'll get a little bit cold in these sort of seasons. But likewise, when the weather's really poor, I'm just not heading out there to do it at all. I mean, there's the safety aspect of it, of course. I mean, it's one thing going out there to hike in these environments, another thing to go out there and sit and go and cook in those bits. I mean, there's a practicality. I think some people sometimes think, well, maybe the impractical full stop, but but some people also think that I spend all my time out there and I cook every meal in the hills. I'm going, well, no, I go back to bricks and mortar house at the end, like I'm like everybody else. And it's just a different aspect I enjoy, a different micro adventure. Yeah. Something else to perhaps go to the coast for the day, have a little cook up on the beach. Come back, pack up, again, go to the lakeside, have a swim or a paddleboard or something out there and do a different activity. So if I'm doing a big point-to-point or I'm doing a big day in the fells, I'm out there for a good 7-8 hours, I'm probably not going to be taking all the same kit as if it's a different aspect. But I think sometimes people mingle it all together and think, oh, he's always cooking a beef Wellington, no matter what he's doing. It's going well. Not the case. It's different aspects, different adventures. Just like it would be the same, if you were heading down to sort of the lakeside for the day, you probably wouldn't pack all your climbing gear, would you? It's just sort of
now, you did mention cooking on the beach, and I know Wayne, you had a very special moment when Harrison actually popped up on the very same beach he was emerging onto in a kind of James Bond emerging from the sea onto the beach, and Harrison.
And I'd pasta waiting for me. Yeah, it was amazing, and it was just a dead cheeky comment. I think on LinkedIn, you'd been visiting some of the cafes, restaurants around the lakes, hadn't you? And I'd said, "Oh, you're not near the west coast, are you?" And then suddenly I've got lunch prepared for me right by you. It was absolutely brilliant. I think the only negative was that I didn't do justice to all the food you made me. I think that I was feeling a bit nauseous, but it was amazing.
Don't worry, no, I expected the same. I once cooked for a chap on one of the Bob Graham routes once, and I think he had about 2 spoonfuls and off he went at the time. But
you're saying Dan, yeah.
Yeah, Dan Beaumont. Yeah, so it's not what you want a full meal sometimes at that point, is it? But I think just it was more the morale boost again, coming to support you on that fantastic challenge as well. And it's perhaps more monster from the deep coming out of the sea than it was Daniel Craig at the time.
It definitely was.
Perhaps down to the
Yeah.
state of our waterways currently. But who knows?
Yeah.
But no,
Yeah.
it was a great bit on there. We got a lovely day at the time. A little bit of wind,
Oh
but the
God,
sun was
yeah.
shining, wasn't it? A nice little dish out there.
Yeah.
So I think we did a red pepper mascarpone sort of gluten-free pasta for yourself
You
on the day.
did,
Didn't we?
yeah, yeah. And some was
Garlic,
there some flatbread or something.
yeah,
Yeah, it was
great.
amazing. Could just have that again now. But yeah, so yeah, let's roll that on because we've got to plug the book some more. You have got this book out. And what's it called again, mate? Let you do the plug.
Thank
Kathy's got a
you.
copy there.
I'll hold it up so you can remember what it's called, Harrison. Here we go. Podcast special.
That's it. Well, prove I can read. No, it's all good. So it's Cookout is the book. So Cookout by me, Harrison Ward, Fellfoodie, and it's all basically about different gourmet recipes to try and cook outdoors out there on single burning stoves. They've all been designed specifically for that sort of stove output. And again, with all the ingredients listed, the equipment you need out there, tips and tricks of how to cook outdoors, as well as perhaps the right behaviours to be doing out there, sort of the leave no trace policies and elements of the countryside code in there as well. And really, it's one of those that are some dishes from the very basic sort of breakfast options there to ones I've dubbed sort of the Summit Special, again, to go back on the pun train there. And ones that are a bit more pan juggly that perhaps I expect to see more cooked at home rather than anything up high. But again, this will work fantastically for people that are camper vanners, van lifers, but perhaps bouldering out in the summertime or someone else cooking something up, whether it's paddleboarding the lakeside or it is hiking up the hillside. All these dishes will work really well just to try and improve your sort of outdoor cuisine really when you're out there. So if you are someone that is a foodie that also enjoys the outdoors like me, then perhaps some of these dishes will inspire you to sort of cook out there. But we'll see. Again, I appreciate it's quite a little niche element that I'm in. Really much a pleasure to be able to do this. Very much a childhood dream to write a cookbook, one that I didn't think would come to fruition with some of the darker days I've been through. And we'll see. Again, it's just one of those passions that I've enjoyed and can hopefully now share to other people. And thank you very much for stocking it as well in your wonderful shops.
Oh no, thank you for coming in and signing copies as well. So yeah, it is like the ultimate Christmas present. We've been having a flick through in Paisley Towers at home. We do actually have to choose which stove that we cook the meals on. Actually, that's all part of the excitement because we do have a few. But no, there's such a brilliant range. There's loads of top tips. There's a really easy method on each recipe to see what kit that you need for that particular recipe as well. And I have to say, I did do justice to the food that you cooked on our fantastic staff training event. And I went back for seconds and thirds because it was absolutely magnificent.
Fantastic. No, you did indeed. But maybe next time, Wayne, I'll give you a little takeout maybe.
Yeah, awesome. Or maybe I'm not doing a monster swim beforehand. Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah. Although
a little dry bag for you to keep behind you as you're swimming up.
yeah. 10th of June, I'm starting the next round. So if you're available in that week following, but you just mentioned beef Wellington. Is that in the book? I'm intrigued.
No, it's right. No, it's a bit of a joke. It's one of those that I think someone always shouts out to me at one of the expos I do or festivals and say, "Have you tried a beef Wellington yet?" And I go, "There's always one, isn't there?" Like I've tried to, do some bits that are quite adventurous out there. Again, you mentioned Mary Berry at the start. I did bake her a cake in the end, which is probably one of the most pressure moments I've done out and about. But beef Wellington, perhaps we'll see. There might be a slightly bastardized version, a sort of deconstructed version at some point, but that maybe would be quite a challenge on the stove. But never say never. That's kind of I enjoy the challenge aspect of this. So whether it's katsu curries or stews or fresh breads out there from scratch, again, we'll see what can be done out there.
Fantastic. I'm very, very much looking to try and getting some of these recipes done and sorted, and the challenge itself. It's great. Beef Wellington, maybe with beef with the pastry on the side, even maybe that can.
Yeah, there's got to be some way to do it, hasn't it? Yeah.
Or just beef with Wellington, cooking in your Wellington boots, maybe. So wearing your Wellington while you're cooking the beef, if you just want to take it, go on a complete angle.
Yeah, that's maybe another way I can go. Maybe less literal. Maybe that's it. Maybe I'll go more props and all things involved, perhaps.
Oh, Harrison, I know you obviously go out on day trips up into the fells, but you also are a big fan and a big advocate of bivvying and wild camping with a low footprint, making sure that you leave nothing but footprints and nobody knows that you've been there overnight. What's your favourite kind of wild camp or bivvy setup Have you got any favourite? Well, actually, we won't go favourite locations because that's like everyone's going to go there, aren't they? So, what about sort of key pieces of kit or little bits of comfort kit that you always take with you and you never go without?
I think it's still something I'm still perhaps piecing together myself. I mean, I'm by no means an expert in this. You see, I think when I first started out, didn't even know what a bivouac was sort of at the time. But seeing someone post about it on Instagram, I think Adventurer Nick, who sort of got me into a lot of hiking at the start, and he was asking questions as a complete novice, going, "I've never done this before. What do I do? And is that not illegal? What can I do that?" And of course, it's going about that with sort of the right attitude, I think, and always sort of obeying those sort of unwritten rules in a way, and sort of pitching up sort of late, packing up early. Again, always leaving no trace, whether it's just the cook or whether it's wild camping out there. But for me, again, I'm not known for someone that packs light, so I'm always someone quite a bit of gear on there. But I love sort of being out there again on the tops, and that's where I think the food really lends itself. You've got something nice to enjoy, especially when the nights are maybe getting a bit darker earlier as well, or cooler out there, to enjoy a bit of conversation over, to really improve the spirits and I think the morale of camp in a way, and then kind of have something to look forward to at breakfast in the morning too, whether it is freshly grinding some coffee up as well, or making sort of a full breakfast up on the hillside, or some pancakes out there, for example. But for me, it's kind of, I suppose, bits I always like to take on, they're very much the basics, I suppose. If I'm tenting or I'm bivvying out there, so I'll always have a good sleeping bag out the side of things, which again, back to the boots and the waterproof thing, I think is one of the most vital bits of kit for camping out at times. You can usually get away with some other bits out there, but I think the bag's going to see you through the night for quite a bit. Again, I've got quite a lightweight Thermarest sort of sleeping mat I take out there as well. I tend to like to take a pillow of some sorts if I can out there, but I tend to find that the little small ones, I've got a little seat or something, I think is it Aero, I think, that packs out so small, it's tiny and blows up.
They're absolutely
it's cracking. But I find otherwise I end up sleeping on my arm and I wake up every 20 minutes because it's fell asleep and I have to keep shifting constantly through the night. And but it's all part and parcel, I think, of the game. I'm not counting out my full bedroom pillow, that's for sure. But bits of that there. And again, then otherwise it'll be the cooking side of things. So hopefully I try to go out of a little group, just a small group of people, nothing too big again. Otherwise it's not quite in the culture of the wild camping. And then I'm sort of out there trying to make something nice and hopefully trying to share a bit of the load with some friends, whether it's the pots and pans or some of the foodie bits out there as well, and just make up a nice meal in camp. So again, nice curry out there, curry and rice or chili perhaps on the stove. Again, we could make some little flatbreads out like I had with Wayne that time. And otherwise that's it. So I'm not too much with me really. Again, I'll probably pack it all into anything from maybe sort of a 30 litre up to a 65. Probably I'll be taking up there at times, just sort of packed out with the gear for a one-nighter. But I have had some great adventures into Scotland, into the boffies as well out there, sort of camping out into boffies too, and having maybe multiple nights out there, trying to cook fresh as much as possible over sort of 2-3 nights as well, which has been a wonderful experience, using sort of the fire and the stove in these boffy environments, having quite a group of us in there as well. And again, just going out, taking some Corbetts and Munros for the day, and perhaps even having a little wild swim in some of the lochs nearby, and then coming back to some fresh cooked meals in the boffy is just a really, really human experience that's been full of memories.
Oh, amazing. Do you know what? I think we maybe should do that. Should we go out and do a camp and have a meal and do a podcast?
And record it, yeah.
Yeah, should we see if we can do that?
Looking out the window.
Now. No, not tonight. Storm Debbie. No, I'm not going out tonight. I've camped in some really, really rubbish weather. And
I'll stay in my van. Yeah.
Not imminently, no. No, but maybe one later when it gets a bit fair again, the nights get a bit lighter again, get out there.
I'm thinking like May.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm in again. Yeah.
I think it'd be Cathy's choice of cuisine this time though, Wayne. I think she should have to choose the menu.
Yeah,
and I'll do
that's all right.
You can do the washing up.
Love it, definitely. Yeah, it was all disposable. No, it was it was sustainable, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was
sustainable. Please, we're not having any plastics.
Oh, no, it wasn't. Yeah, it was a nice, like a little cardboard tub, wasn't it? With, yeah.
Well, they're my little sample pots I tend to use for the little festivals and things out there as well. But I tend to really like the enamel plates where you can do the ones I look at for like antique stores. I found the old enamel plates, little blue rims on them. The ones that are really chewed up and quite battered are better, I think. A bit of character in them.
I love it.
Always backing that down with me too. I always wash it up back at home, so I'm not washing up in any waterways when I'm out there. All comes back down with me, so I can always leave no trace and always packing it back out again. So, but on that day, I think it was wooden forks and cardboard bowls. I think for that day.
Yeah, it was that. Yeah. Amazing. Well, Harrison, it is. I know I've said it before. It's an absolute privilege. I love speaking to you. I think you're brilliant. Yeah. So, thanks for taking the time to speak to us today. So, your book is called Cookout. It is out now. It is available in the Climbers shop and Joe Brown. Sorry, I'm stealing all your lines here, Cathy, aren't I? I'm shut up now.
I'm used to it, Wayne. I'm used to
Yeah.
it by now. This is the 40th episode. Oh, do you know what? Top stat. Do you know how many downloads we reached today?
Go on.
13,000.
It's
Fantastic.
ridiculous.
Which in
Just
my little
ridiculous.
world, but like considering, we were like, we don't know, let's just try.
Is it? Yeah. You and I like speaking to each other. Shall we give this a shot and see what happens? Yeah.
Yeah.
There we
Amazing.
go. And I made it
Amazing.
into the top 40 as well, so even better.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
you in at number 40.
Top of the pops. Yeah, brilliant.
Well, again, thank you very, very much for me as well, Harrison. It's been really, really super to talk. And thank you very much for popping in the shop as well. It's always great to see you. I know you're just down the road, and the staff are always dead psyched when you come in the shop. I think they're all like, they all remember the meal as well. It was pretty awesome. So yeah, welcome anytime. And thank you very much for your time today. And I'm really actually genuinely going to go away and plan our little spring foray, because I'm really looking forward to that. And we'll get out in the hills. God knows what the end result of the podcast will be, but you don't know till you try, do you?
It'll be fun for us, like, at the very least. Yeah.
That's all part of the fun, is it? Exactly. That's all it's about. That's what it should be about, getting outdoors as well. Whilst it's important to be out there safe and secure, it's having a good time too, isn't it? But it's privilege speaking to you as well. Thank you for having me on, and thank you again for stocking the book as well. Really appreciate the support.
So you can buy Harrison's book Cookout at www.climbers-shop.com. And if you have been inspired by Harrison and are looking to get out into the hills and do some cooking yourself, grab the book. And then on our sister website, we also have a large number of links to all sorts of information on how different stoves work, what kind of stoves to take out with you, how to work out how much gas you have left in your canister, which is always a tricky one. So you can access all that information for free on www.joebrownoutdooracademy.com.